What if the world's most popular cosmetic procedure works by silencing your own nervous system, one nerve ending at a time? Botox, the actual substance, is botulinum toxin type A, a protein produced by the bacterium Clostridium botulinum. Gram for gram, it's the most acutely toxic substance scientists have ever measured. Before anyone panics, the cosmetic injectable dose runs roughly 4 to 100 units, nanogram quantities so small they stay precisely where the needle places them, nowhere near systemic toxicity. To understand what botulinum actually does, you need one specific address in your body, the neuromuscular junction, the microscopic gap where a motor nerve ending meets a muscle fiber and tells it to contract. Normally, when your brain decides to squint or frown, an electrical signal races down the motor nerve. At the junction, that signal triggers the release of a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine into the gap. Acetylcholine crosses the junction, binds to receptors on the muscle fiber, and triggers contraction. Do that 10,000 times a day around your eyes and forehead, and you're literally creasing the skin into a wrinkle. Here's where it gets specific. Acetylcholine doesn't just float out freely. It's packaged in tiny vesicles, and those vesicles are docked and fused to the nerve membrane by a protein complex called SNARE. The SNARE complex has 3 proteins, synaptobrevin, SNAP25, and syntaxin. Together they act like a zipper, pulling the vesicle flush against the membrane so acetylcholine can be released. Botulinum toxin is a molecular pair of scissors aimed directly at that zipper. Botulinum toxin is a 2-part molecule. The heavy chain binds to the nerve terminal's outer membrane with extraordinary specificity. It recognizes receptors found almost exclusively on motor neurons, and the cell pulls the toxin inside. Once inside, the toxin's light chain escapes into the cell's interior and acts as a protease, an enzyme that cuts proteins. Type A specifically cleaves SNAP25, slicing the zipper mid-pull and leaving the vesicle stranded, unable to fuse. No fusion means no acetylcholine release. No acetylcholine means no signal crosses the junction. No signal means the muscle fiber doesn't contract. And a muscle that can't contract can't crease the skin above it. This is also why results take 3 to 5 days to appear. The toxin must bind, then be endocytosed, then the light chain must escape the vesicle and find its snare targets. A multi-step process that simply takes time. But here's the question nobody asks at the consultation. If botulinum toxin is so potent that nanograms silence a nerve, why does the effect wear off at all? Shouldn't permanently cut proteins stay cut? The answer is biological renewal. The nerve terminal doesn't repair its cleaved SNAP25. Instead, the entire affected nerve ending is gradually replaced through a process called axonal sprouting and terminal remodeling. Research published in the Journal of Physiology in 2009 confirmed that new nerve sprouts appear within weeks of injection, forming functional junctions that gradually restore acetylcholine release, typically over 3 to 6 months. Eventually, the original terminal recovers too. Once the cell degrades the cleaved SNAP25 and synthesizes fresh protein, the original junction fires again, at which point the sprouts retract and muscle activity fully returns. Here's the longevity angle. During the months the muscle is inactive, the skin above it isn't being repeatedly folded. Collagen and elastin fibers in that zone get a genuine rest, and existing creases can partially soften. Repeated injections over years also produce mild disuse atrophy in the targeted muscles. They physically shrink from lack of use. This is why long-term users often need lower doses to achieve the same result. But here's a complication the glossy brochures skip. A small percentage of patients, studies suggest roughly 1 to 3%, develop neutralizing antibodies against botulinum toxin type A, and the injections simply stop working. This resistance is far more common in therapeutic use. Treating cervical dystonia or spasticity requires doses 10 to 50 times higher than cosmetic injections. Higher protein load drives a stronger immune response and greater antibody risk. Dressler and Benecke, writing in Movement Disorders in 2004, identified high cumulative protein exposure as the primary driver of secondary non-response in therapeutic patients. Patients who develop resistance to type A can switch to botulinum toxin type B, sold as Myoblock. Type B cleaves synaptobrevin instead of SNAP25. Different scissor, same outcome. Different enough that prior antibodies don't block it. The same snare cleavage mechanism that smooths a forehead also treats chronic migraine, hyperhidrosis, overactive bladder, and strabismus. The FDA has approved botulinum toxin for 11 distinct medical indications as of 2024. The migraine indication is the most counterintuitive. Botulinum injected around the scalp and neck appears to block the release of pain-signaling neuropeptides, like CGRP, from sensory nerves, a completely different nerve type than motor neurons. Remember the opening question? Silencing your nervous system one ending at a time? The migraine data makes that literal. The preempt clinical trials showed that 31 injections across 7 head and neck muscle groups reduced monthly migraine days by an average of 8 to 9 in patients who'd failed every oral medication. Same molecule, entirely different signaling pathway. Botulinum toxin's cosmetic safety record spans over 40 years of clinical data, with serious adverse events in experienced hands measuring below 1%. The critical variable is anatomical precision, not the molecule itself. The most common serious cosmetic complication is ptosis, a drooping upper eyelid caused when toxin diffuses into the levator palpebrae muscle. It resolves as the effect wears off, but it underscores why injector training matters enormously. Board-certified dermatologists and plastic surgeons train on cadaver anatomy before injecting live patients. That anatomical map, knowing exactly which muscle sits millimeters from which nerve, is the expertise being purchased, not just the vial. Researchers at Revance Therapeutics brought daxibotulinum toxin A to FDA approval in 2022 under the name Daxxify. Its peptide-based formulation extends duration to roughly 6 months, nearly double the standard product, by improving nerve terminal retention. Longer retention means the peptide anchors the toxin inside the nerve terminal, slowing its degradation. The snare proteins stay cleaved longer before the cell can synthesize replacements, extending the silence of that neuromuscular junction. The frontier that changes the equation is topical delivery. Revance's RT001 gel reached phase 3 before being discontinued, but the science didn't die with it. As of 2024, Anterios, acquired by AbbVie, is advancing ANT1207, a nanoparticle-encapsulated botulinum formulation designed to penetrate skin without a needle, with phase 2 data expected in the mid-2020s. Before the takeaway, one finding that genuinely surprised researchers. A 2020 meta-analysis in Scientific Reports, covering 11 randomized controlled trials, found that botulinum injections to the frown muscles produced a measurable reduction in self-reported depression scores. The leading hypothesis is the facial feedback loop. If your face can't form a frown, your brain receives less negative emotional input. The molecule that started as a wrinkle treatment may be quietly reshaping mood research. If you're considering botulinum treatment, the single most protective decision you can make has nothing to do with which brand is injected. It's verifying that your injector holds board certification in dermatology or plastic surgery and can name every muscle in the target zone. And the larger implication? A toxin discovered in spoiled sausage in the 19th century is now an FDA-approved tool for wrinkles, migraines, depression research, and needle-free drug delivery. The most dangerous molecule ever measured turned out to be one of medicine's most versatile.